And if you were to write a book, what would the title be? Emily Engelhardt, a fellow ComNet Detroit leader, says Wednesday night. That sounds like it has a good story behind it. I'm already intrigued. Sherri Arb, you can't make this stuff up. I love it. Lou, my tears with General Motors. Julie, I would buy your book, Financial Wellness, The Never-Ending Balance. These are great book ideas. Well, as people trickle in, I'm gonna just get going here because we've got a really rich conversation to get into, and I don't want to cut the time short for that. So on behalf of ComNetwork Detroit, welcome. ComNetwork Detroit, for those that are new to the group and joining us for the first time, we are an open network of Detroit, or wherever you're coming from, because we live in a virtual world, social good communicators. So it's really anyone that's writing, doing comm strategy, design, photography, film, research, whatever you're doing to advance social good through communications, this is your group. In non-pandemic times, we like to meet in person on a monthly cadence. Right now, we are still doing our monthly events virtually, and we try to stick to that cadence as well as we can. We have a Facebook group. So if you go to Facebook and you put in ComNetwork Detroit, you can find us there. We post all of our events, but we also post other questions that we have. Job openings is one of the big ones. Resources that we need. We're looking for a web developer, etc. So any of those things between these meetings, when you could use the help of your fellow communication pros, please put those in the Facebook group, and we will be responsive to them and hope to build some community on there between the meetings. But these meetings are really twofold. One is every month we like to give a different topic where we're exploring with some professionals that are really experts in an area to help inform us on how to do a piece of our job better. Because I'm sure we're all, wearing many hats and could use all of the resources and, best current practices that we can. And the other objective of this is really the primary one, is building community. So we want to have a network of people that we can all be calling, emailing, to rely on when we need something, when we're hiring a position, when we're looking for a vendor, when we're announcing a new president and we want to talk to people that have done this before. When you have questions like those, we want to offer a network of people that you can rely on to go to. We're in a local chapter of the National Communications Network. If you go to communicationsnetwork.org, and we'll drop it in the chat as well, you can find out more information, including how to be a member and about the annual conference. This year, the annual conference is going to be virtual, and it is October 6th through the 8th. So stay tuned for more information about what the content will be, but I will say it is my favorite conference and the one that I never miss any year. I get so much out of it. not just content, but the people I meet. So that's what really drew me to be a part of ComNetwork Detroit, and I hope you will feel the same. So please feel free to use the chat function throughout the meeting, and know that we're going to have a Q&A section at the end where you can engage directly with our panelists. We'll also leave a few minutes at the end of the meeting for folks to make any announcements like job openings and the like. So here we are, you're here today because you know media can be a powerful element to advancing your organization and your cause. But I wanted to take one moment before we jump in with our panelists to reflect on the impact that media coverage can have beyond disseminating information. Getting great media coverage can help you reach influential audiences that you might not otherwise be able to get in front of. That can help you attract new donors, volunteers, and advocates. It can build the reputation and the credibility of your organization, your leaders, and your partners and allies. It can shape public opinion and shape public policy. It can shape the perceptions and share truths about the people that you serve, and it can spur action. It can also be really difficult. Getting the attention of journalists and reporters and conveying why your story is important to their readers or viewers, it takes some planning and effort. And whether you're a reporter or you're the person pitching to a reporter, on either side, chances are you're overwhelmed with your work and prioritization is a key. So how do we convince a reporter that the story we want to tell is a priority? That's why we're here today. And I'm so grateful to have our panelists who will help guide us through strong media practices. Joining us today is Sherri Welch, who's worked for Crain's Detroit business for over 2 decades, including 17 years and counting of covering the nonprofit sector. Sherri has won numerous awards for her craft, including those from the Society of Professional Journalists, the Detroit Press Club Foundation, and the Greater Detroit Chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. If Crain's Detroit business isn't on your media list, it should be. Sherri does a masterful job at showing the business side of nonprofits. As a sector that's often overlooked when it comes to innovative business models and practices, Sherri has not only lifted nonprofit social causes in her reporting, but she's also lifted the perception of professionalism that exists in our sector. And if you're looking to reach an influential audience of potential sponsors, donors, board members, Crain's is tops. We're grateful to also have Olivia Lewis, a reporter for Bridge Detroit, with us today. Bridge Detroit is a local news outlet that recently celebrated its very first anniversary. As an engagement first model, meaning their team is focused on connecting with Detroiters and delivering information and content residents say is most important to them. Before Bridge Detroit, Olivia was a reporter for the Battle Creek Enquirer and the Indianapolis Star, and she's really familiar to many of us here because she also has a background in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector. She worked for Direct Relief International, the Kresge Foundation, and the Council of Michigan Foundations. Thank you both for being with us today and taking the time to speak with us. Before we get into the nitty-gritty on tips, I wanted to give us all an opportunity to know where you're coming from. So Sherri, I wanted to start with you. What led you to nonprofit journalism, and what kind of stories do you most enjoy covering?
Well, if anyone else has ever heard me talk, and by the way, it's nice to be with everybody today. Great to connect. I can't see all your faces, but I look forward to getting in touch by email later. So I had kind of a funny track. I didn't plan on getting into nonprofit journalism. I was raised very charitably and As anyone who knows me knows, I'm one of 8 kids. So, we had a long, lesson of charity in our family, but it just never even struck me to go into nonprofit reporting until I really didn't have a choice, to be honest with you. I started out covering other things for Crain's. The Crain Communications, the larger company, we have a lot of newspapers under the umbrella. And I was writing for the highly, highly interesting rubber and plastics news. I used to be able to tell you everything that was rubber on a car because I had to sniff it out in order to write about it and not compete with automotive news. But long story short, we were on the front end, our advertisers of the whole recession. I mean, we saw rubber parts makers saw things dropping because a lot of rubber components were low tech. They saw it dropping maybe 5 years before the rest of the country. So at the end of 2003, right after I bought my house, I got a call from my editors who said, this is not what we want to have to tell you, but we have to let you go. But they said, the good news is Crain's Detroit business has a nonprofit reporter open, a nonprofit reporting job. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit concerned after covering automotive suppliers for 5 years, the dot-com boom, the bust, the mergers, the acquisitions, and then the Chapter 11 filings were starting. I was a little concerned I'd be bored with nonprofits, but hey, I had a house, I had a daughter, I needed to work. So I took that job and I moved over. And I think anyone in the industry will understand this. Somebody told me, you now have the redheaded stepchild beat. That's how they explained it. And they just, they thought there was an assumption at the time, I think, as my publisher, Mary Kramer, many of you know her, shared with me that many people looked at the sector like spaghetti dinners. They didn't really think there was a lot of real business happening. It was kind of the pet project you did when you were ready to retire. And they just weren't, looking at it as a real business. So her charge to me, and I've kind of carried it with me all these years, was to lift up best practices so that other nonprofits could learn, and that so people outside of the sector who might be serving on boards could understand what was happening. I mean, not to mention the amount of philanthropy coursing through the sector. I mean, in business, cardinal rule is follow the dollars. So there were a lot of reasons for us to cover this sector, and we've stayed with it all of these years. I'd say that all of that said, I never really looked to get into business writing either. I just kind of landed into it. But my favorite, Natalie, to your question about favorite types of stories, I have the reality of having to cover the business side. I can't ignore it almost in anything I write about. But my favorite entrance is when I can include the human touch. I mean, I've covered a lot of beats for Crain's over the years, retail, hospitality, but nonprofits and philanthropy has been my mainstay for over 17 years. And it's the most rewarding. I mean, you feel like you can have impact when you can talk about the difference that you all are making. So yeah, I couldn't point to any one single story, but the ones that have that human touch, I hate to say it, but the quintessential poster child, it's a good hook as long as there is a strong backstory, the reason to use that person to tell a story. So yeah.
Thank you, Sherri, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Olivia Lewis, well, your career path has flowed between the newsroom and nonprofits. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about the thread that has connected these careers for you. Are there skills and interests that have carried you along your path?
Oh, for sure. And hi, everyone. Hi, Natalie and Sherri. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today. And I am chuckling as I hear you ask this question because people ask me that all the time. They're like, girl, what are you doing? And so just like I said, my book title is like, Dear God, Make It Make Sense. I'm about to make it make sense. The underlying thread through all of my opportunities has been storytelling. So every time I think about an opportunity, I'm thinking, how can I use my passion for written work to share information, perspectives, so that we can really learn and make informed and engaged decisions together. And so when I started my career as a local reporter, I was in traditional media and I was writing stories about the local community in Battle Creek. But I didn't feel like the stories I was telling were having the greatest impact that they could. So I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to learn how to incorporate data into my storytelling. I wanted to be able to take a deeper dive through research. I wanted to be more effective in my storytelling. And so while I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to intern at the Kresge Foundation. And I was working in their communications department. And that's really where the strategy part of my work kind of kicked in, where everything I had been doing before was basic news writing. And so working in the foundation space really created a shift in my work in terms of understanding audiences, understanding who we're reaching and why, and thinking strategically about how do you share your message in a really effective way and make sure you're not only reaching your current audience, but growing that audience. And even when I also was an intern at Direct Relief, I took on a big data project, but learning how to take all of these numbers and turn it into something that the everyday person will understand. How do I make this relatable? How can I take and use GIS and use visual storytelling to really dig into issues so that other people will begin to understand and care about an issue. And so everything I've done has really been grounded in storytelling. I've just added more skills in research and strategy to have greater impact and hopefully tell more effective stories.
Wonderful. Thank you, Olivia. Thanks for joining us today. Well, I'm going to dive right into it now. Sherri, what makes a good pitch?
Unmute myself here. Okay. Well, I think it's important that people pitching really know what type of coverage the media outlet you're pitching to covers. I mean, as great as a story might be, it may not be something that's in our wheelhouse, or no matter how we turn it, we can't fit it into our wheelhouse. So it's pretty important to understand who we are writing for, so that you understand if your story fits into that, or if you should perhaps pitch to a different organization. That'll probably save you a lot of time and frustration and emails and calls. At Crain's, I think some people know this, but we cover a range of business stories. I mean, they might start with really short and sweet stuff like an organization naming a new CEO, to a foundation investment in new approaches, or sometimes it's a new program that a nonprofit might launch. I mean, I can't say that in every single case we're going to report about every grant or every program. There's sort of a thread of new. That's kind of the definition of news, right? Something different, shifting. And so we're really interested in new strategies. We're very interested in new people coming in to lead organizations. So again, we can't write at every single appointment that your organization might have, but we're pretty focused on the C-suite level, just because they're very much behind the strategic decisions made for an organization. But I guess I would say that those smaller pitches, sometimes they fit, sometimes they don't fit. Sometimes it's a facet of how much other news do we have on our plate and we just can't get to it. I mean, there's some news that we will just, we will make sure we get to it. But there are some things that if it's, a smaller story, sometimes if we start talking about it, I'm famous for emailing back and forth, and I'll start asking questions because I don't have time to get on the phone, but I can sense there might be something there. So I might shoot back an email and ask a question or two, and then I might say, I'll get back to you if we can do anything with it. But those smaller stories for me and for Crain's, they sort of start building that relationship, and then they start to beget larger stories. When I start hearing enough from enough people about let's use fundraisers right now, that we're bringing our fundraisers back, but they're not going to be the same size they were, at least until we feel like we're completely out of the woods with the pandemic. Now I've heard from, 3, 4, 5 different organizations. Now I have a trend. There's a story right there, and I know exactly who to call about it. So, I mean, I would say don't not send us the smaller news, at least me. I mean, I'm not sure how Olivia prefers to work on this, but at least for me, email is the best way to get me. And I do think that those smaller stories can sometimes, you might be surprised, a couple of weeks later, I'll call you and say, hey, I'm doing this story and I think you guys can fit into it. Or it just starts to tell me a little bit about you. I'm learning about your organization if I don't already know you, or you mean, we start to group people, like what types of organizations are these and what's your expertise, that I could actually at some point maybe call you back and say, hey, this fellow organization, they do something similar. Does this make sense? You want to comment on it? So, I mean, it's a good back and forth relationship that I would say makes a good pitch, Natalie, but it does start with understanding who we write for. I mean, Crain's, we have some overlaps, say with Bridge or with Crain, the Detroit News or the Detroit Free Press, but we definitely have a very specific audience that we write for.
Olivia, how do you make decisions about what you cover?
Yeah, so Bridge Detroit is different. We are different from any other news organization, starting because we are a nonprofit entity, and we're also an engagement organization. And so I think the way that we determine what stories to cover and what questions to ask is a bit different than how I would approach a story when I was in traditional media. And so, number one, I'm not a beat writer. So it's a little bit different in terms of, I don't just cover one topic. We really prioritize our stories based on what the community says they want information on, what's needed and what's useful to Detroiters. What are they saying that they want to learn about that they aren't necessarily getting at other media outlets? And so the great thing about Bridge Detroit is that we have a cheat sheet. We have a community priorities model that details the issues that Detroiters have said that they care about. And our engagement director, Orlando Bailey, does a ton of outreach and works with our community advisory committee to really help us understand, what Detroiters are saying, what are they asking about, to help us determine what is considered the vital civic information. And so right now that's been a huge array of things, especially because we launched in a global pandemic. And so right now, a lot of that information has been around health and welfare. And so we've done a lot of stories on housing and policing, education. So we love writing about schools and students, emergencies, obviously coronavirus, civic information. We've written stories about the Redistricting Commission, political and public policy information. There was an election last year. Detroit will have local elections this year, the environment. And then I got a text from one of my neighbors, I think it was 2 months ago now, but they were asking Olivia, you've been writing a lot about marijuana. What is going on? Should I be concerned? What happened to your job? And the answer is no. It made me laugh, but jobs and economic opportunities are part of the community priorities model. That's something that Detroiters say that they care about. And so marijuana and how Detroit has a new ordinance that could potentially create new jobs for Detroiters is something that people are saying that they care about. So we're going to continue writing about it. So it's just all of these things wrapped up together. And I'll also say I have never worked on a team that is as thoughtful as Bridge Detroit. Every story we start to ask ourselves the question, why is this important? What questions haven't been answered yet? And whose voices need to be included that haven't already been included in a traditional news story? And so all of our stories are engagement focused, they're high impact and direct response to what's being talked about in our community.
For anyone looking to find out more information, Bridge Detroit's, Olivia, tell me again, it's called the engagement survey that you did, the priorities model.
The community priorities model. And I can, I'll put the link in the chat in a second.
Yep. So that is on their website. So you can see these different areas and see, if something that your organization is working on aligns in one of those. At the end of the conversation, we're going to be sharing Sherri and Olivia's emails. So you'll have a chance to follow up and pitch to them as the opportunities arise for you. I was wondering if both of you, Sherri, Olivia, could share an example of a pitch that really, it caught your attention and turned into a great story. Sherri, we'll start with you.
There are a lot of them, but one that immediately comes to mind, it kind of started, again, it started as a conversation. I don't want to say the pitch was perfect going in, but we got there. It was really, I thought it was a good story. Vista Maria in Dearborn, they pitched a story to me, going back, it was like summer or later in 2019, before the pandemic. And we started this conversation. They were talking to me about the second center for human trafficking victims they were putting on their Dearborn campus. And immediately I asked, well, why didn't I know about the first center? So, because we never reported there was a first center. And, the answer made perfect sense. There were security risks. And so they had very quietly opened this first center on their campus. But they were ready to talk about the second center because, things were not improving as far as human trafficking. And human trafficking on the face of it is it's not necessarily a business story. I mean, you could make it into one, but it's a huge issue. And it had my attention anyway, but I had a niece who was unfortunately a victim, and she's fine, but it caught my attention for that reason immediately. And so I talked with my editors and I said, this is a huge issue. And they said, well, there's a new center. Let's see what you can do with it. And during the conversation, came to realize as I was interviewing with the folks at Vista Maria about the center, I mean, there were business aspects, of course. Why was Vista Maria investing in a second center? How were they supporting it? There was philanthropy behind it and grants and, other things. Why was it needed? And so it started to become a business story for Crain's because there were all of these strategic decisions being made by a nonprofit to put things in place. Not to mention that it was the first quote unquote secure center for human trafficking victims in the state. And so that sort of brought a little bit of a policy angle to it. I mean, the fact that there were not more secure sites and for layman's terms, what they mean by that is a locked site. They didn't want to have to say that, but there's locks on those doors because unfortunately the girls will go back to the people exploiting them. And the story allowed me to get into most of, this kind of brought it home for me, this whole human perspective of why these young female victims were getting entrapped, how they were getting entrapped, because they didn't feel they had, a strong family life, and they were finding quote unquote family, with their boyfriends, again, quote unquote boyfriends, who were getting them into this life of, addiction and human trafficking. And so it was just a very, it was a multi-threaded story. There were definitely business angles to it, but it was rich, I believe, because it allowed me to get into the human element in this bigger problem, A, of human trafficking, and B, of not enough secure sites in the state. I was told that, the Johns, for lack of a better word, would hang out outside of a lot of the centers in Detroit and other areas because they knew these girls were going to be released. They would just pull them right back in. So it was an important story. I'm hoping to follow up on it. It was one of those things where I finished it, after months of reporting right as the pandemic was coming on. And so, 2 months into the pandemic, we did publish that story last year. And sadly, as much of an issue as ever, you wouldn't believe it, beginning of the pandemic, and it was still a huge issue that, I talked with the FBI and I talked with the, Michigan State Police about the number of folks who were having, ads put out. So it was a favorite story, Natalie, because it allowed me to go into the human condition. I did my job and told the business side of it, but I really believe that people are what people remember. The dollars and cents, they're important to mention, but they remember people and they remember the human condition. So that was my favorite, one of my favorites.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important, as we think of those press releases that often say, X organization grants X amount of dollars to this other organization. And how do you make that special? And unless those numbers are really huge or who's giving it is, very newsy, it's often I don't think the greatest headline to start with. So unless, again, it's really grabbing about what that number is or who it is, like really what's the human angle while you are getting around to, that new donor recipient relationship.
It's kind of
Olivia-
the impact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the impact, and that, I mean, not to be, I don't know what the word is, but I mean, sort of in parentheses, after the money comes, so what? What does that mean? Why is it important? And if you pitch to us that way, I mean, there are some things my editors have me write it up if it's a big dollar amount because, hey, it's news, but the so what is the most important part of it, I think, even for a tiny grant too. So.
Thank you. Olivia, anything jump off to your memory of a pitch that was really great and you just loved the product story that came out?
Yeah, I guess I have a few examples actually. Right now, my favorite story is one that we actually just published last week on two Detroit students who were speaking up. They were participating in a speaking competition statewide and nationally. And so the actual pitch that I got was from a woman who is not in Detroit, not even in Michigan. Their organization is not based in Detroit or Michigan. However, the information that she sent me, I think the subject line said something like, Michigan youth are speaking up. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting because we want to write about the youth in Michigan. And so that made me open the email first and foremost. But then the content of her email said, there are students in Detroit who care about specific issues, and these are their names, and these are the issues that they're talking about. And so she didn't give me a ton of information about the actual challenge or what they were doing. It was more so there are kids in Detroit and they're in your coverage area and they're talking about the issues that Bridge Detroit covers. And so it gave me the opportunity to click on the links and say, okay, well, what are these kids really talking about? And it ended up being a really great story that connected with a lot of people in Detroit because they were talking about redlining and they were talking about emotional well-being. And so it connected with so many people on so many different levels across all of the issues that we cover that it ended up just being a really great story. And so that was a really, I think, just perfect pitch from someone that I had zero connection to, who didn't have a connection to Detroit. It was just like, this is a great story. But I've also had really great pitches that were not actually a pitch. There is no press release. There's an email saying, hey, like, we've got a report that we've been working on and we think it would be interesting for the news. Can you take a look at it? And so I love a good report. That's my jam. If you send me a report, I'm going to try to use it. I'm going to look into it and see what can I learn from this? Is this going to be helpful? Does it connect with any of these issues that we're concerned about? And so some of the local, entities that have sent us really great reports lately was like Detroit Future City. I'd love when they send out a new report. United Way, their Alice report, always really great. The Detroit Education Research Partnership, NEI. There are so many reports locally that connect with all of these issues where it's like, we can use this for more than one story. And I think that that's kind of forgotten sometimes when you're making a pitch that like, hey, we have this information and it's not just this one-off story. You can use this again and again and again and mention it and ask more people more questions and follow up with this. And so I love a good report.
I think that's a really good point too, that not everything needs to be a formal press release, but sometimes these communications between you and a journalist are just kind of a conversation starter of, I think I've got something, is this of interest to you? So Sherri, Olivia, is that, would you say establishing a relationship with you in that way, where you're coming at a reporter because you've researched them a bit, you've got an idea and you want to fly it by them without having like a standard, set press release? Is that an okay practice for folks?
Oh yeah, definitely for me. I almost prefer it because I also feel like, oh, I'm getting this information first. Like there is no formal press release yet. And so you're giving me a chance to look at the information before any other reporter.
It's the same for me and for Crain's. My editors actually give me more time to work on things when we're out ahead on it. So if I can develop it and we're ahead of it, I mean, it's part of building a relationship. And I think part of that is just deciding, again, what type of news it is, how it fits. But I think it gets easier once you start talking with reporters. You understand, they'll start talking. I can't do anything with that. Thanks for letting me know, but I'll keep it in my back pocket in case it comes back. But you'll start to understand, or we'll say, oh yeah, let's talk, and we'll be right out there. But I think that I feel like I might be jumping in on another question, but I do think I've encountered some PR folks who are pitching multiple exclusives. And I think that's a contradiction in terms. So you should be very careful with that because reporters have long memories. I know of a couple who've done it to me and then it shows up somewhere else and we've got it slotted for a Monday story or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, it's kind of, there is some picking and choosing, and I think every story could be different. It just depends on what it is you're lifting up and the relationships you're building with reporters. It's easier. Once you talk with us enough times, you kind of know. I don't know. Do you agree, Olivia? Once they start talking to us, they understand better how we write, what we're covering. And I mean, also, you can see it in our coverage, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've started to build new relationships with people since working with Bridge Detroit. And I remember when you sent me something that was good information, that was useful, or even if it's like, hey, I may have heard something, I think you should just call this person and see what they have to say. Or, hey, I heard this might be going on, maybe look into it a little. So it's not, and it doesn't mean that I will guarantee a story every time, but if I can rely on you as a source that I can call on and say, hey, where can I find more information about this? How can I learn more about this? That's really helpful. And when I see your email pop up, I'm going to remember, wait, don't skip over this one. I get 100 emails a day. I'm going to try to go back to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia, you had also mentioned to me a story about someone that tried to develop a relationship with you in a way that you would not advise. So I'm wondering if for the group, if you can share that example as something that we can avoid.
Yeah, this actually happened when I was in Indianapolis. And this woman approached me as she wanted to meet up for coffee, but it was more for it seemed like she wanted to just network in general and just professional relationship. But when I got there, she wanted to pitch me a story about a business. And I wasn't even a business reporter. I was covering, it didn't match my coverage area at all. It didn't relate to anything I wrote about. And it was just very inappropriate. And I felt very used. And so it was just this is the opposite of how to reach out to a reporter. And I think it's so important to recognize who you're pitching to and how you build that relationship with a person, because like Sherri said, we're gonna remember it. And so I'd rather not have this bad taste in my mouth of oh, you tried to trick me into writing something. I'm just this is very uncomfortable.
I have to say, it made me think of, I worked for a nonprofit in the past that had some fundraising practices that I'm not sure were on the same level of ethics that I would prefer to exist at. And it one of the things was just get that coffee meeting and then make the ask, kind of roping people into meeting with you under, this general assumption, but then getting your real ask in from them. So I just wanted to kind of lift that up for all of us in many scenarios to, I forgot who originally said this, but clarity is kindness. Let people know what you want from them right off at the top. So I wanted to open to Q&A from the group. If there's anyone that would like to ask Sherri or Olivia a question, you can just come off mute and ask away.
I have one. Hi, Sherri. Hi, Olivia. Good to see you both. So when you were talking about impact and like stories of impact, I find that a lot of times we just fall into that trap where journalists say they're not interested because it's too much like good news. Or, if we just recently had one of our partners reach out to us, they had a news release going out on Monday. And it was both had a bit of a news hook in that there was an expansion of like a cohort of organizations that were working together on an issue, but also that they had like blown past this big goal that they'd set and we're making huge headway in this area that gets a lot of media attention and coverage. But none of the journalists were interested in the fact that they had done such a good job, that things were working. And it's that thing where it's like, it's good news, so it's not news. So, how would you recommend nonprofits that want to share this thing that they're doing is making an actual impact, a difference? Is it put it in a report and then it's interesting if it's written up in a report, or how would you suggest people approach that?
Well, I can jump in. I think it's a misnomer that reporters are always looking for bad news, because that's not true. At least, in my case, I don't love to cover the bad side of things, but the flip side of covering best practices is covering stuff that's not best practices, so that other nonprofits can learn from them. And I always try to keep that. It's not a gotcha kind of story. It's a hopefully other nonprofits can learn from this. Really quick example on that: directors and officers insurance. There was an Oakland County nonprofit that didn't think, I'm using directors and officers, but they didn't think that they needed to pay their employment taxes. There was also a Detroit nonprofit. So the IRS came after the board chairs of both and put a lien against their houses. That was a hard story to crack, because people were embarrassed. They didn't want to lose their house. One woman, I think her marriage was actually broken up over it. But I was really able to talk with them over some period of time to say, we got to share this other nonprofits so they know it's real. And some of the other nonprofits thought D&O insurance would cover it, and it didn't. But as far as good news, I mean, that's the kind of story that I don't look for, but I have to tell it. I guess that was my long-winded lead up on that. But Krista, as far as the good news, I think it's not just that we don't want to report good news. It's kind of that in parentheses, so what? Why is this important? If you're having impact on a problem that others are not using the same approach, and you say, hey, Sherri, this is a novel approach, look at the impact we're having, I can line you up with a study, to Olivia's point, or something else that shows the magnitude of this problem. This is how we're going at it. That's kind of a programmatic story, but it would grab my attention if it was a new, unique approach. It would grab my attention if it was being benchmarked by other nonprofits, and now we're talking with others in the community, or maybe even in other states. I wouldn't say I'm averse to good news. I would just say that we just don't have the firepower in our newsroom to just report, story after story after story of the good things that nonprofits are doing. Nonprofits are supposed to be doing good things, but there has to be something novel about it that sets it apart from the rest.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, with what Sherri is saying. And I think there's a few things with that. And so good news is really great, but it's not always timely. And so if there are much bigger issues that are, and I hate to compare like which issue is more important, but if there are, I guess, a bigger news story that's happening the same day or even that week, we're a small newsroom. And so if I know that what you're pitching is a good story, but it's not going to change within a week or two, I know I can put it aside and circle back to it in a couple of weeks. I know that it's not something that has to be reported today. I can wait a little bit, and when I have time, I'll go back to it. And so I think good news is, it's not like we don't want to cover it. It's just that it's not always the most timely. And then thinking about the size of our newsrooms and how often, like, is this something we can circle back to, and who are your partners so that, hey, we can come back to this later. But my advice in terms of like, how do you get attention to that would be to pitch it again. Like if you didn't get a response the first time, maybe change the subject headline, maybe say, hey, Olivia, send me a message on social media, on Twitter, or text my phone and say, hey, I sent you this. Can you maybe circle back to it? Maybe you missed it. I wouldn't try more than, 3 times to reach out. By then it would have been like, okay, I am ignoring you. But if I don't respond the first time around and you think this is a really important story, I think it's something good, try reaching back out and maybe rephrasing the subject line.
I see a hand up from Preston.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Great.
So my question is kind of in response to like the last few responses. Like, I guess from an outside perspective, someone that's not particularly a journalist, but someone that may be involved with, a nonprofit trying to make a pitch. What would you consider, to be like an appropriate timeline? So, you say if it's not necessarily relevant per se in the next 2 or 3 weeks, what would be, the correct or a quote unquote perfect timeline for someone to say, reach out to you, give you time to collect information about the story and write it and have it be put out, in a timely fashion? What would that look like?
So I'll go first, since I think you're asking that based on what I said. I think it just depends on what the topic is. I'm trying to think of an example, but nothing is coming to mind in this moment. But I think it really just depends on what the topic is, and if it's something where it's like, okay, is this like something I could put into like a season? Like, is it a summer issue and maybe this will come back up? Or is it something that we can talk about around the holiday season? That's the time we do a lot of evergreen pieces on, and especially on nonprofits and foundations, because that is a really optimal time for giving. And so I think it just depends on what the issue is and like, how can we categorize it and I guess make it relevant to the community at a given time.
Just a quick follow-up. When you talk about organizing, do you have like a specific, categorization structure of how you would say, these pieces go here, or I like to prioritize these, or is it more arbitrary? Like, do you work more based off of specific categories, or is it like I said, more arbitrary, I guess?
No, definitely off of specific categories, and like because we base everything off of the community priorities model. And so when you talk about organizing, that makes me think of like elections and organizing voters. And so I think we've done a few stories where we've been sent press releases, or someone has reached out and said, hey, our organization is doing this. We're going to talk about this issue. If you have time, can you join the press conference? Or we already had this press conference. I know you weren't able to make it, but here are some quotes that we think were really poignant. Or these are the people who were included, and maybe you could follow up with them at a later date. And so that's how we've approached it so far. And it's so far, I guess it's been working, but open to more suggestions if you don't think you're getting heard.
Let's say for Crain's Detroit business that there's no cookie cutter answer, unfortunately. I feel like maybe knowing a little bit more about what's going on inside of the newsroom it could be helpful. It's not like we just sit there and wait for an email to come in and we say, I'm not going to cover that one. It's not like that at all. There's just hundreds of emails coming at us, and we have editors pulling at us. What do you have for the daily newsletter? What do you have for the morning newsletter, the afternoon newsletter, the nonprofit newsletter? Oh yeah, what do you have for the print issue next week? So we're feeding multiple beasts, if you will. And we're constantly assessing, okay, that like for me, like that naming an executive director or a CEO, that can definitely hit the web and I can get that done pretty quickly. I'll write pretty quick. Or if you see a headline with a $sign in it, okay, there's a $12 million, there's a $17 million commitment. I can probably write a few paragraphs and churn it out. But the more developed stories, we're talking to layers of people for those stories. We're supposed to make it look easy when we get done with them, but when you see me disappear, it's because my head's down. I'm talking to people on stories you know nothing about yet. You'll see them, but they're out there. And I just came out of some stories for the Giving Guide, an annual supplement that we include, which comes out next week. And it takes me out of commission for a couple of weeks. I still have to write kind of the short stories to feed the nonprofit newsletter in between. But I've had to tell people, to Olivia's point, I can't take anything on right now. I have to keep my head down. And it's really hard because we're journalists. We want to write these stories, but we have to say no in order to get other things done. And I mean, my priorities don't always align. I mean, I get pulled different ways because my editors say we're doing the special sections. We need everybody on staff to contribute. So clear your decks, or you need to focus on this, put that on the back burner. So some of the things we have no control over. If there's breaking news, that pushes things back. To Olivia's point, the things that we're listening for are extreme timeliness, topical. Why is this story important now? That's kind of another thing that I think about, and my editors will question. Why should you tell the story now? If it was news a year ago, what's newsy about it now? Why are we going to tell it now? There has to be a hook, as they say, with the story, whether it's timeliness or the dollar amount or the fact that you named a new CEO, or you have this great new mousetrap that no one else is paying attention to. Look at the impact we're getting. We're a tiny little nonprofit in Detroit. Nobody's paying attention to what we're doing, but you should probably look at this. Here's why. And again, it's kind of, it's us juggling what are all of the big stories out there, what do we have time to spend time on, and it's a question of priority and breaking news, and it's just a constant juggling act, right, Olivia? I mean, it never stops. But you should also know our newsrooms are very small. We don't have a lot of people in them, and at least I'm guessing it's similar at Bridge Detroit. We don't have defined beat reporters for everything. So if you see my byline on something that's retail or hospitality news or convention center news, it's because they needed someone to take it. And they'll say, you've covered some of this before, you can move into it quickly, can you take it? And I have to move other things aside. So I think that, again, going back to the relationships, it's very helpful to have that kind of rapport where I can say, okay, if I'm going to get this done today, I have to hear back today. Otherwise, I got to push it to next week. And the people I work with on a regular basis, I think they know that, they appreciate it. It's not that I don't want to cover the news. It's just that A, I'm not going to cover it. B, I have to push it. Or C, we have to have it done before the end of the day, just because of all those newsletter realities and all that good stuff. So it's kind of the back thread, Preston, to what you guys don't see that we're always judging news on. It's not that we don't want to write your stories. We'd probably write every story we could. We just don't have time. And by the time we get time, it may have lost its timeliness, or every other media outlet wrote about it, and we just can't get back to it. Sound about right, Olivia?
Yeah, it does. And I do have one other suggestion that I think answers both your question, Preston, and Krista. So one other thing you can do if you have reached out 2 times already, and we're like, I just really don't have time. I would really like to cover this, but I don't have the time to do it. I think another option is to submit an op-ed. That's one thing that Bridge Detroit has really embraced, is that we are a tiny newsroom. We really don't have a lot of reporters. And even though we have a lot of partners, I think there is a great value, especially from a nonprofit, having someone's personal voice say, hey, we really care about this and we're working on this, and using your own voice and just using our platform to project and let other people know about this. And so there have been times where it's like, we really want to cover this, but we don't have time. And so that goes back to that like timeliness issue of like, this needs to get out within the next 2 weeks, but we don't have a writer who can tackle it right now. Submit the op-ed and see if we can post that instead.
Could you define op-ed for me? I've heard it before, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, so an opinion editorial. And so op-ed, you can basically say, I represent this organization. We care about this one issue. And so you are going to write a short piece on how it connects to the work that you are doing. How does it connect? And because we are Bridge Detroit, is there a policy or a civic relation piece where you can talk about this specific issue and how does it affect the community. I think that's all really important to include within your op-ed.
Thank you. So I want to save a couple minutes at the end for folks to be able to share any big news that you have, job opportunities, things that you're looking to fill. But we have one more question in the chat. So Sherri, I was wondering if you could give us a 1-minute answer to this. I think it might be pretty easy. The question is, are there any oh, now I've lost it, but essentially it was, are there any subjects related to nonprofits that you just will not cover? For example, fundraisers or capital campaigns? Oh, you're on mute.
Fundraisers, I wouldn't cover every single one of them just because there are far too many. It's like anniversaries. We don't cover them because everybody has one every single year. Same concept. So if there's something novel about it, if you're starting out a brand new approach, something like that, pitch it to me if you think there's something novel. There's one happening at the old Tiger Stadium. I'm forgetting who's doing it right now, but it's 400 people. I know about it. I haven't had a chance to write about it yet, but that's crazy coming out of this pandemic. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? That's grabbing my attention because it's timely. In any normal year, that's normal. It's not normal right now. So it's context. And I also think as far as capital campaigns, even if I can't cover it per se, we have a capital campaign list. Tell me about it. Send it to me. Even if I don't write a one-off web, we have a running list. And I think we include that in our giving guide so donors would know about it. So there's different outlets where I can push coverage. If I wouldn't write about it, you could possibly get a mention somewhere. So it's good to know about it.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Sherri and Olivia, for joining us. I have put your emails in the chat as you have extended the opportunity for any of us that have pitches or just wanted to start to get the relationship going with Sherri and Olivia. Please use those emails to do so. And I wanted to open up the conversation if anyone has any job opportunities, etc. So I'm going to post these on ComNet Detroit, but just yesterday I was told of two and wanted to make you all aware. One is that Gleaners Community Food Bank is hiring a digital manager. That's not really the title, but essentially what it is someone that is going to be their web developer and do some design work. Having the web development background is the most important. The job budget is around $57,000 a year. And the other one is Merit Goodness, Give Merit. Give Merit is looking for a director of operations. I'll post that job link on ComNetwork Detroit. Does anyone else have any news that they wanted to offer up?
Natalie, I will share in the Facebook group during the session today, someone did include a link to a bunch of job openings at Teal Media, I think is the name of the firm. Yep. Yes. Okay. So, oh, Alex, hi. Are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Thanks, Krista.
Yeah.
I'll say just a word on it. So we're Teal Media. We're a design agency that is based in Detroit and DC. We do work exclusively with nonprofits and foundations, and we just posted 4 new design roles. So an art director, a designer, 2 UX UI design roles. They're fully remote, though we will have probably an office in Detroit again. In 2022. So please reach out. You can message me on Facebook if you're interested or if you have some candidates that could be a good fit. Thanks.
Anyone else before we close it out?
I just had one quick thing. I'm pretty new to the group and the network, but hold on, I'm on the phone, Granddad. I'm working on my own nonprofit that I'll be starting up right now. We already got a few things going, I'm just looking for one more person that might be interested in being one of our, on our board of directors. We're working with college students. We're just trying to provide resources that they may not have. Our age group is probably like 18 to 26. So, leaving high school seniors as well as college seniors, just providing resources that they need to get work done. So that'll be bookstore gift cards, printers, and we're hoping to give away some laptops too, if we can make that happen. But like I said, we're looking for someone else to join our board of directors. We got a couple of people, that I want to be on the board, but in terms of, legally making this process happen, we need one more person to join the team. So I know everyone's busy. Everyone has a lot of things going on, but if anyone is looking for any opportunities like that, reach out to me. I'll be welcome.
Great, and we're right at 2:00. If anyone does have interest in talking with Preston more, you can let us know on the ComNetwork Detroit Facebook page. That might be the best way. Or if you have my contact information, I'll put that here. I can definitely connect back with Preston. But since we're right at 2:00, I just wanted to try to give an easy way for you to reach out. Thank you everyone for joining. A particular round of applause for Sherri and Olivia. Today's session was recorded, so you can share it with anyone that missed it. Thanks again, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Where can we find it for the people that missed it?
You can find it on ComNetwork Detroit's Facebook group.
Okay, I'll be joining the group shortly.
Great. Thanks, Preston.
Thank you.